why does President Biden and the Democratic Party hate Britain so much?
You don't. We have to be realistic about what's going on around the world. And when we were the bridge to the EU, that was very important to the US. But now we've left and we've become a moat. We've put a moat around ourselves. So we're no longer as important, especially with what's going on in the war, illegal war in Ukraine, what's going on in the Gaza, now the Houthi attacking the ships. We're simply not a priority.
So, but President Trump took a bit of a different view than Mr. Biden and his team, didn't he? He wanted to progress a trade deal with the United Kingdom, which would be hugely important to our economy. In fact, America is one of our biggest trading partners. Should we all be going into 2024, the year that will decide the future of the West, not least with European elections, elections here in the UK and elections in the United States, praying for a Trump victory just to help the UK economy?
No, I think you can't just look at a Trump victory just in terms of trade. You've also got to look at it in terms of security and what's happening on the world stage. I think really importantly, Jake, what I'd say is, look at what's happening around the world. We've got three giants, the US, China, and possibly India, that will dominate the rest of the world. And we, as a medium-sized nation, need to be part of a union to ensure that we don't get sat on. And I think that's what's so important, is that we have to be realistic about where we are in the world, and yes, how important we are to other people. But on our own, one of the results of the Brexiteers winning the referendum and then leaving the EU is that we are no longer as important to the US, and that's the reality of it.
Well, look, President Trump in his last presidency delivered peace across the world. A lot of these conflicts have happened since he stopped being president. Stability and economic growth and the hope of a UK trade deal. President Biden has delivered war, chaos and economic decline. Surely Britain should be supportive of a Republican victory at the next American elections, because it will just be, whether we like Trump or not, whether we think he's a nice man or not, whether we like his style, it will be good for Britain, won't it?
I think it will be good for the world in an odd place. I think there are definitely things that Trump did that actually helped the stability of the US and actually, as you say, peace around the world. At least he was willing to go in and negotiate. And they're good and bad. But we can't rely on Trump delivering anything to us, because he is very nationalistic and he will do whatever is in the interest of the US. And as his term goes, make us great again. And that does not necessarily include the UK. So any trade deal would always put the US first. And that's where we know, from farming to importing, exporting, etc., and the supply chain, that is a reality. So even if it's Mr. Trump as president of the US, there's no guarantee that a trade deal would be extremely beneficial for us in the UK.
Well, of course, Nikki Haley, who's second placed, also is a huge fan of Great Britain, as is President Trump. I mean, President Biden, he's interfered in all sorts of things, hasn't he? Interfered in the Northern Ireland Protocol. Of course, Obama interfered in the Brexit referendum. Surely these American presidents, while it's good to hear from your friends and allies around the globe, they shouldn't be interfering in UK politics in the way that we've seen over recent years.
They weren't. I wouldn't say that they were interfering. When Mr. Biden was in Northern Ireland, that was about peace. And remember, also, it was George Mitchell and, that group that came together to secure peace in Northern Ireland was made up of countries from around the world: Canada, America, European countries, Europe, UK. So it was a collective negotiation that led to peace. And I think that's what we probably we need to see in Gaza and Israel. So it's not about one country being better than another. It's about how we deal with the future. And I'm afraid that Mr. Trump, as I said, is very inward looking. And I don't have the faith that he would put the UK's interests first.
But he says he will. Look, so we've seen this foundation agreement scrap, which is the precursor, if you like, to a full trade deal. It's a bit of a blow for Kemi Badenoch, isn't it? What do you think it does for Kemi's reputation as in government?
I think that finally they're actually seeing that somehow make the same parroting we're seeing in the US that we're seeing here, that Britain is going to be great again. It's actually, the reality is biting, and that's where it's so important that we are realistic about this, is that a trade deal with the US is not a priority for any existing or incoming president, I don't believe. that trade is going to be about who is the most powerful, and we are no longer powerful because we're not part of a union or a bloc.
Well, Gina, President Trump did say famously that we were going to be at the front of the queue. He loves Britain. I mean, he's got massive interests here. He owns
Oh, no,
golf courses in
Jake,
Scotland.
don't get me wrong. No, exactly. He loves Britain. I mean, absolutely. And lots of people around the world love Britain, and that they love our culture, they love our humour. There's so much to love about Britain. I mean, we all love our country, but it's the fact of the reality is about priorities. And we are not as important. We're a medium-sized country. So Mr. Trump will be looking at what's going on in Russia, what's going on in China, what is going...
The fifth or sixth biggest economy in the world. So economically, Britain absolutely still counts. I think internationally, Britain still counts. And I love my country, as I'm sure you do as well.
We all do. And look, I want us to have a trade deal. But the reality is, and I want all the things that were promised in Brexit to have come through, because then we wouldn't be where we are. And I wish, the people who won actually could deliver on what they promised. That is not happening. But the reality is, in the last 3 decades, the world has changed. We are now a medium-sized country, fifth, sixth, whatever it is in the country. But in our children and grandchildren's lifetime, that will not be the case. So we have to be very careful about what we say in reality about where our position in the world is. And that has to be with similar-sized nations, because we are not one of the 3 big giants or even one of the 5 big giants any longer.
But, Gina, we are economically still a giant. We're the fifth or sixth. It does go up and down a little bit. But there are small countries which are still very influential, like Britain, like Japan. We are still an economically giant.
No, Jake, you have to look at where the predictions are, where it's going, and how the world is changing. We have not got a huge population, huge economy, huge military power. And we cannot, on our own, combat the things that are coming down the track with our borders, be it climate change, mass migration of people. We need to be part of a union. And that's the thing. We are an important voice.
Gina,
Jake, we've always kicked above our weight. We've always done that. But that's because we were trusted as being a sensible, reasonable, well thought of, well-educated country. Now we're seen as a country that really doesn't know what it's doing because we spend all our time infighting. Your party spends all its time infighting.
But Gina, why do you constantly say that the only way Britain can succeed is being told what to do by other countries? Yes, we need international partnerships, but this idea that Britain can't be a successful independent state as a small island, as we always have been.
Come on,
why do you not believe that? I do.
You know better than that. You know that we're not told what to do. We're a sovereign nation, and the fact is we're treated as equals. Actually, we never lost that. We won't go into that argument, but that's a fallacy. But the idea that we were at the table and we were very important. We've always been a very important voice. But the fact is, we had a seat round tables that we no longer have.
Well, we've still got our seat. We're still permanent members of the UN Security Council. We're a nuclear power around the world. Look, I'm not saying you don't, but I just really, really believe in Britain. And I don't think the future of our country is being told what to do by other nations. Britain can be
that is
nimble,
not about
important, big enough to count, nimble enough to be able to manoeuvre around the global stage. Gina,
well, then do something about our economy then.